We can see you. Take it
Oh,
away.
awesome.
We're live.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy that we could be here today, this Tuesday morning. I know there's so much happening across our nation and even here in our city. And I know it's not easy for all of us. When we see the events of what happened last week at our Capitol, I know that it's something that brings great sorrow to many of us. And we reflect on the history of our nation and we reflect on what got us here. And, I think about Queens as a borough being the most diverse county in all of these United States, really represents the mosaic that we say our nation should and could be. And so as we're here in Queens and under this new administration, the Richards administration, we are committed to bringing all of the borough together, to unifying the borough, no matter who folks are, no matter who you believe in, what you believe in, your sexual orientation, your gender identity, your immigration status, even your political affiliations, your parties. It does not matter. We are one Queens and one borough, and Queens will lead the way to show how we could be a united city and how we can be a united country. As the most diverse borough, I think we have an opportunity to do this. And so this morning we're here. I know we have this meeting and we're going to be talking about education issues, but I would be remiss if I did not address some of the situations we see. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Frank Joseph. As the Deputy Borough President said, I am currently the Chief of Staff and Senior Advisor for Borough President Richards. I formerly was Deputy Commissioner at the New York City Commission on Human Rights. So many of you may know me from that capacity. And previous to that, I was Chief of Staff to then Council Member Donovan Richards. So it is a reunion of sorts, and I'm happy to be back home, helping to lead the borough in many different ways. Unfortunately, the borough president had an unforeseen circumstance, which does not allow him to be here today. Perhaps he may be able to join towards the end of our meeting, but so happy that we have such a phenomenal leader in our deputy borough president, who's done so many great work and will be chairing our meeting today. So it is my pleasure and my fortune to introduce to you all Deputy Borough President Rhonda Binda.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you for that great introduction. I hope you can introduce me for every meeting now that you're here. He's really hit the ground running. Yesterday was his first official day. And I hope that we all get a chance to at some point meet in person. Frank and I are both very much interested in all the changes that are happening at the community boards. And you have some great folks here that have been with you all over the years that will continue to be your points of contact, but also feel free to reach out to myself and Frank at any time if we could be helpful. And I know some of you I don't know. In the interest of time, I've asked Carolina to send my bio, but I do know some of you from working at the Jamaica bid, and we've done some incredible work over the years. At that time, Jamaica was named the #1 neighborhood in New York. We won the governor's top award for downtown revitalization of $10 million. I think according to Sharon Anderson in our office, we only have one more aspect of that award to wrap up. And we were also, the recipients of awards from the Neighborhood Challenge Grant and the Department of Cultural Services. And so what we're looking to do is to take some of those lessons that we've all the new folks that are here that Frank has learned from other agencies and just bring that all to Queens, and let's boost and take this borough to new heights. And so you all are part of this. We're so excited about this new era that we're embarking on. And I hope that you can also continue to use Frank and myself as a point of contact as needed. So it's so great to see so many familiar faces. Like Frank said, it's a reunion. There are a lot of things happening all over the world and all over our country, and especially in Washington these days. But we've been very much focused on local issues here in Queens. And the borough president has really put forth a strong strategy about unifying our borough, and it's around the concept of one Queens. You all are so instrumental in that. So thank you for all the work that you do. And I would love to introduce our honored guest today. We're so lucky that we have such a great partnership with the Board of Education, and we have our Deputy Chancellor here, Josh Wallack, to speak with us about some of the issues that we have been facing during the pandemic and what we should expect. And so I would love to introduce him now, and you'll have a chance to answer questions afterwards. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be with all of you. I'll just move right ahead, just in the interest of time. But we're joined today by several colleagues from the Department of Education, and I look forward to hearing from many of you during questions and answers. I'll try to leave as much time for that as possible. I just want to start though by thanking the Borough President and Deputy Borough President, and I did, in a previous life, work at the New York City Economic Development Corporation on the downtown Jamaica plan, and so have fond memories of walking around that neighborhood, and it's nice to be working with you again, and Frank as well. Thank you for bringing us together, and just to recognize, or just to acknowledge the words that you started with. Looking forward to working with you on these important issues and just the general task of bringing our communities together and moving forward during these unprecedented times. I want to just begin by giving a little bit of context for what we're going to discuss today. Obviously the crises that the city has faced has touched all of us in different ways. It's fundamentally changed many of our lives, and this is no exception. In response to the pandemic, we've had to make some significant changes to the way that we conduct admissions to our screened schools, and that's the topic that I'm here to discuss with you today. So I want to lay those out quickly and then take questions about them. And my colleague Nadia is going to share the screen just to give context for them, sort of why we needed to make changes this year. Is simply because we did not have the information that we typically do when we're admitting students to screened schools. And so in particular, when we think about middle schools, for example, they typically use three pieces of information when making admissions decisions. They use grades, they use state test scores, and they use attendance. And as a result of the pandemic, we did not have state tests. We did not have final grades in the way we typically do. And attendance didn't make sense in a world where many families were suffering and students could not attend school in some cases. And others were making a transition to remote school, which was challenging for all sorts of reasons. And so that was one reason that led us. And then the other is that, as you'll see when we talk about high schools, the pandemic has also sort of highlighted for us some longstanding issues of equity and opportunity in our city that caused us to re-examine some longstanding practices that limited opportunity for some of the hardworking students in our system. And so we made some changes based on that. I'm going to tick through them quickly, again, just in the interest of time. If anything's unclear, you can stop me, and then we'll spend most of the time today on sort of questions and answers. So the changes that we made for middle schools it's a relatively short-term change. It is a pause on screens for 1 year for this admission cycle. So schools that would have used grades, test scores, and attendance to decide which students would be admitted to the middle school, or other measures like interviews or in-house assessments, all of those screens will be paused for 1 year. And instead, families will fill out the middle school application, rank their choices. They can choose up to 12 options. And if there are more applicants than there are seats in a school, we will determine who gets those seats using a lottery, a totally fair process. It will be essentially luck of the draw. The exception to that is that any schools that have a district priority or a zone priority, those will remain in place. And we left those in place to honor the fact that many families, especially now, it's heightened now, want to keep their middle school students sort of closer to home. And we also were just in the spirit of keeping these changes sort of based on what we're, on the changes that were forced on us by the pandemic. We kept those priorities in place. The application for middle schools opens this week, and we'll go through the beginning of February. And we'll talk a little bit later, and I'm sure there'll be some questions about how we're getting information out to families. And we really want to work with you to do that, so that folks are as clear as they can be about this process and know where to go if they have questions or concerns. On the next slide, we refer to high school admissions. And this is where, this is in part related to the pandemic, but really it's the fact that the crises that we face highlighted for us some longstanding inequities. And that is, that there are a set of high schools that essentially limited the students that could attend to those that happen to live, nearby in the zip codes, regardless of how well they were performing on tests or grades. And so we're going to phase out these geographic screens over 2 years. In year one, any school that has a priority for those living in the district, those will be eliminated. And in year two, any remaining geographic priorities will be eliminated. Some schools may move faster than that, but that's the schedule that we have laid out, and they can't go slower than that. And so the idea here is that we want to increase the opportunities available for every student. We don't want to see opportunities limited based on a student's zip code. And so academic screens will remain in place. We will use older data, essentially a year older, the test scores and grades, and some of the grades from the year that the pandemic hit us, like the first marking period grades. We will post those criteria on our system so that families can understand it. And any auditions for high schools will take place virtually so that we keep people as safe as we can. And it's also more convenient for more families. The application there will open the week of January 19th. And again, the idea here is if you're a hardworking student that's done well, we have citywide high school choice in New York City, and that means you should really be able to apply anywhere in the city. And over the next 2 years, we're going to make that true. In the past, we've really had citywide high school choice on paper, but many students were limited in the schools that they could apply to based on where they lived. And that practice we want to bring to an end. The next piece of news is about the specialized high schools admissions test. This is for the 8 specialized high schools that use the single test for admissions. And as many of you know, there's been quite a bit of discussion about this over the past couple of years, but the process remains in place. It is a matter of state law. And so in order to minimize the risk and maximize the convenience, we are going to administer the specialized high school exam at middle schools this year. So hopefully fewer students will have to travel. More students will be able to test with students that they're already in buildings with if they've been live, although middle schools right now are not live, but still we'll keep cohorts of students together. They'll register by January 15th. The deadline's coming up at the end of this week. And we will administer the exam during the school day on January 27th. And we will open buildings up for that day if we're not back live by then. We are right now working through all the logistical challenges of this and getting word out to the students that are interested. But want again to ask for your help in getting word out to the many families that have been asking us about this. We are moving forward. And we'll run the specialized high school admissions test this year to admit a new class for this fall. Just an additional update on our ongoing planning to integrate more schools and classrooms in New York City. We are working with an additional 5 districts this coming year. And our plan and intent at the department is to work with all 32 community school districts over the next 4 years to come up with plans to meaningfully integrate schools that make sense given the community's specific circumstances and plans. And we've had some really terrific experiences working with districts throughout New York City, and look forward to continuing that work in Queens. This is, and we'll make sure that you have this after this event, so no need to take a screenshot or take notes if you don't want to. But this is information about virtual events that families can attend related to high school admissions in New York City. We ask that families register just so we have a sense of how many folks we have, and to make sure that we can accommodate everyone and make sure that we can support them in attending. But you can see we have 5 sessions scheduled for high school admissions and for arts high schools to inform families about the virtual audition submission tool that we've developed. We have 4 sessions coming up. But again, I think if you know, we would like to partner with you and make sure that you have information so that you can help us inform families throughout the borough about these developments. I think that we, again, just in the interest of keeping as much time as possible for Q&A, I'll stop there and just say, I think we know that these are, you know, more significant changes at a time when a lot of us are dealing with significant changes, both in our work and personally, and with our neighbors and friends. We made these changes because we thought this was the fairest way to proceed for our students and families. But we know it'll take a big community effort to make that true, to make sure that folks really have the information they need to navigate. And we're ready to work with you in the weeks and months ahead to make sure that we accomplish that. We have with us today colleagues from the Department of Education to help me answer questions about details in you know, throughout the borough, and also other topics that might come up that you might be curious about just in general about school opening and reopening, and the way we're handling the weeks and months ahead as we navigate these crises together. So thanks again, thanks for having us, and we're ready to answer questions.
Thank you, Deputy Chancellor, for that comprehensive overview. I'm sure we'll have some questions.
If anyone has questions, feel free to raise your hands and we'll call on you. And Rhonda, I'm going to make you co-host so you could actually see who's raising their hands.
Thank you.
We have a question from Kat Bressler from our staff.
Hi, good morning, and thank you so much for that presentation. It was very informative. I do have a quick question. I think it's great that you have a plan for phasing out geography, because we know that we don't want zip codes determining the education you have access to. But in that, as folks go forward and are vaccinated, we know that attendance can be such a struggle for students that are traveling a great distance. And will we be offering Zoom and Google Classroom and things like that in the future? If students are getting into specialized high school, they shouldn't be penalized for 2-hour transit. I'll stop for a moment and let you.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And I think there's two ways that plays in. First, I think the longer question that we would love your help. We haven't arrived at an answer. So this is really for all of us to think about together is, you know, what is the role of attendance in factoring into admissions for screened schools? I think, you know, we've had some questions internally about that. Because oftentimes that's affected, as you said, by travel times and also just by other family circumstances. There's, you know, whether a family is temporarily in temporary housing or has some other illness in the family where a student's called upon to help care for a family member, et cetera, et cetera. And so we've heard from a lot of people that that's a concern. And I think it's an open question for us as we emerge from this pandemic and think about long-term policy. And then the other question you asked, which is I think really important and good, is what is the role of virtual classes and virtual education long-term in the system? And is there a way to give students a little more flexibility in participating in class that way, particularly for those with long travel distances? And again, I think we've heard the Chancellor say that there are pieces of this that we want to carry forward into the future of the system, and we have not made firm decisions about it. So it's very helpful to hear your sort of take there, Ms. Bresler, and we'll take it back and factor that into the thinking. And if others have views about it, we'd love to hear it.
Frank, do you have a question?
As in Galuccio? Yes.
Yes.
Not a question. Hey, good morning. Thank you again, Chancellor. I'm sure somebody's else will ask this question, but can we get a copy of that presentation to send out to our ed chairs, et cetera?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. That was it. Thank you.
Sure.
He looks nice. Marie from CB8, you have a question?
It's on the other question with the attendance. I think the family should be able to turn in a letter of some sort to explain the reason for the child's absence. And then that should be weighted in along with the attendance. I think that would be a good solution.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Gary, CB5?
Oh, you're muted, Gary.
Hi,
Can
Gary.
you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thanks. So thank you for putting this together. One of the things I've always been concerned about is needing to motivate students. They have so many different distractions that I think the Department of Education has to do more as far as just generally motivating students to learn. Because too often, as soon as they get out of school, and they can't even stay at school now for after school programs, they're up to their iPhone or the equivalent thereof or their computer. And if you can't keep them in school, especially the middle school students, as far as like any kind of educational help after school, you need to motivate them to learn. I think that's really important. And it's real upsetting to me, and I know the Department of Education has done better in recent years, and tell me if I'm wrong as far as graduation rates, but in many areas, those rates are still very, very low. In many neighborhoods in the city, in your typical public high school, those rates are still pretty darn low. Certainly they're under 60%. And even schools by where I live, which are pretty middle income to more than middle income neighborhoods in 5 Queens, Ridgewood, Maspeth, Middle Village, Glendale. A lot of those kids in those schools are not reading on grade level. So I think that more needs to be done to motivate them and to provide after school help for them when they can't stay at the school to get that help.
Thanks for that. I mean, we certainly, I just want to say, I mean, we share that concern and want to work with you on this set of topics. And as you said, I think we've seen some encouraging progress in recent years. The New York City graduation rate has reached now over 77%, which is, we've been making steady progress every year for the last several years. And we know we have a long way to go before that's not a sufficient result. We want to see all of our students not only graduating, but excelling and moving on to college or career. I think that's why you saw the mayor and chancellor just a couple of weeks ago announce new initiatives that will help us sort of accelerate as we come out of this pandemic. Additional supports for students, new assessments, for example, so that we can tell where there might be challenges or where a student's excelling and could use enrichment going forward. and new curricula that are, to your point, Mr. Giordano, not only suited for the classroom, but also have really strong digital resources so that students, when they're on their computers or phones, can be motivated to continue to engage in learning and can use those devices as part, to continue their schoolwork, even after school. And we'll have the sort of social supports that they need to keep that motivation and to make sure that, they're healthy and well and able to engage in learning. I think we are really focused on that as we're trying to sort of get through day to day and get our staffs and vaccinated, and hopefully all of us soon. We're really focused on what next year looks like, and in making sure that we continue the progress that we've made and not let this crisis derail that progress. But hear you loud and clear, and are really open to other ideas. But we're quite focused on those topics. Just want to reassure you of that.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
Mark from CB12 13. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for putting this together. It's nice to see a new Borough Cabinet coming together. My question is this: the students are really behind for any number of reasons, be it lack of broadband, be it lack of the devices they need to get online, be it their parents don't even know how to help them learn at home. Is there any consideration, and I do understand that there are union issues with school during the summer or extended hours after school, so at least they have a shot at catching up in the short term?
Thanks for that question. I would say that I think we are giving thought right now, and I'd love to hear more of what you have in mind. But I guess I would say we're thinking about the summer at this moment, and in the past we've offered sort of additional summer support under the program Summer in the City. And I think we're thinking about how to make the most use of those weeks this year, especially since the vaccine rollout has begun, and we're very hopeful that we'll be able to resume live instruction, as soon as this fall for everybody. So take that. And extended hours, I think there's a lot of research that indicates that additional time, in class can help accelerate learning, as well as sort of after school programs and tutoring programs. And we're looking at all those options. If there are, I guess I would say if there are good models of this, I think we are really big fans of learning about what's working and trying to imitate it. And so if you, Mr. McMillan, have examples of schools that you think have been doing this well or programs that are especially successful, we'd love to learn about them. And maybe we can, adopt some of what they do or work with them as partners this summer or into this fall.
And one other thing, please.
Sure.
What about Saturday school?
Yeah, I think at this point, we'll think about all the options. I think that's really interesting. And I think that one, I just have some personal experience talking about this. I think for some areas of the city, that could be really, that can be a really good option. It depends,
I know there's religious considerations and stuff.
Yeah.
I understand that. But,
yeah.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I believe Kat has a question. Thank you, Kat.
I do, thanks. Hi, just a follow-up question. Since we know historically testing, specifically standardized testing, has not served marginalized communities well, and we have an opportunity to look at the data now with a whole module of testing not being used for middle school or high school applications. And we're going to be able longitudinally follow this kind of historic thing that's happened here. Is there a plan by the DOE to do that, to look back and see maybe about how effective it was to not use testing?
I think that's a good point. And we do plan to look very carefully, as we have at all of our diversity initiatives, about how well they're working, both to, you know, for all the for everyone involved, but most notably the students and what their trajectory looks like. And so I think you're right. This is a moment to look very closely at what happens, both as it's happening to make sure that students and families have the support they need, but also longitudinally to see how those cohorts move through the system and what their trajectory looks like. So we plan to do that and learn as much as we can from it. Much appreciated. I would also add that I think, you know, the standardized tests are mostly administered by the regions and by the state, but I do think that they're also looking at this carefully, and we partner very closely with them, and we'll keep them posted on our progress as well. I think that's going to be an interesting set of discussions.
We have a question from Maricela, our Director of Community Boards.
Hi, good morning. This is Maricela. One question. So for the high school admissions exam, you said that you will be using older student data.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that exactly mean? Does that mean 6th grade and elementary school, or does that mean, what does that exactly mean for parents who are looking, you know, to kind of make sure their kids are on the right track?
Yep, I'll start, and then I'll ask Sarah Kleinhandler, who's our Chief Enrollment Officer, or Nadia Chada, who helps lead the work there, to jump in. Generally, what I mean is, in most cases, like previous to this year, screened high schools looked at information from student performance in 7th grade. But because of the pandemic, we're going to have to look at a sort of mix of 6th and 7th grade data, mostly 6th grade though, which is what I mean by older. And we believe we can do that just because there's a little less variation year to year in that data, and we thought it was the fairest way to proceed. But as far as the specifics of that go, let me just hand it over quickly to Sarah and Nadia.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Sarah Kleinhandler. Nice to meet you, and I'm happy to be here. Nadia, you can chime in here with me. So to echo what Deputy Chancellor Wallack said, yes, it will be a combination of 6th and 7th grade data, because there were no standardized tests last year. So current 8th graders are applying for high school. So since there were no standardized tests for them in their 7th grade year, we will use the standardized tests that were administered to the current 8th graders in their 6th grade year. We will use the final grades of 6th grade, and we will use the 7th grade grades up through like the first, just before the pandemic. Nadia? Okay.
So that's their first middle school year. Essentially, and we thought that was, you know, again, I think we're all making adjustments. This is not ideal, but we thought it was, you know, the fairest way forward in the circumstances. And that, you know, by removing the geographic screens, we were, you know, making a step forward, but we wanted to preserve some stability in the system, and also honor the work that, you know, students and families have been doing. So that's how it shook out.
Thank you for that question, Marcella. We have a follow-up question now from Marie.
Has the Department of Education considered pairing students together? For example, you can have one child who does very well in English and history, and another one does very well in the sciences or math. Like having them work together, and it creates, you know, they feel good about themselves because there's something they can contribute, and it helps them with, you know, not being so isolated and having a partner or a buddy, especially now that everybody's at home and by themselves. I think that would be a very good thing to do. Are you guys doing something like that already?
I'll start, and then I'll see Kate Generalitic, who's joined us from School Climate and Wellness, may have more to add, or may not, but I'll give her an opportunity. I have heard about, I think within schools, I think principals, school leaders, and school communities are doing this, you know, creating cohorts of kids to support one another during this moment, in advisories or other peer support groups. and also to provide some academic support for one another, you know, through whether it's through project-based learning or through sort of steadier groups that cross classes. And I'll say, just like from this, we think is an extremely promising approach. And I think just the way you put it is really important, that students have different talents and skills and can help support each other in different areas. And I think this speaks to why, you know, we think it's really powerful to have schools that have kids from with different perspectives and experiences and strengths, and that they should all be learning together because they can learn from one another. And that speaks to how we admit students as well over the long term. Because, you know, grouping just all the kids that score a certain way in one place means you may miss opportunities like that. So something we're thinking very hard about. I don't know, Katie, if there are other systemic ways that I don't know if you're still on, but you're there. If there are other systemic ways we're coming at that. We may have lost her, actually. Yeah, that's fine. I think I gave you the best I've got, but we can get back to you with other examples if we have them. And it's a great idea.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, and Deputy Chancellor, for that incredible informational dump. We will probably have more questions, so we will.
There may be one more. Jonathan?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. And this is kind of less of a pedagogical question.
Thank you.
I saw in the newspaper, I think it was today, that teachers are retiring at a much greater rate than was anticipated. And anecdotally, my wife is a special ed teacher at one of the specialized high schools in Queens. And she has said to me offhand, a lot of teachers have packed it in or going to pack it in. Could you talk about plans, I guess, really for next year of backfilling those slots?
Yes. So I'm actually not aware of the specifics, just to say it. I'm not saying it's not right. I just don't happen to know offhand. But I will say that, you know, our sort of human resources department keeps very close tabs on that. And, you know, this year we had to make, as you all know, really quick moves in personnel to make sure that we could open safely and in a healthy way for our students. We do have the capacity, and I've seen this live, so to bring on a lot of fantastic teachers at once if needed. And so I'm sure this is something that we'll be, you know, looking at every month now and keeping close tabs on. I'm confident we'll be ready for the fall. But I appreciate you raising it, and we can keep you posted as we go.
Yeah, I'd be interested. Thank you.
Sure.
Debbie?
Hi, good morning, and thank you all for putting this together. A great presentation, Deputy Chancellor. Very informative, and we appreciate it. Quick question. How much going forward is going to still be remote learning and in school learning? I know I've heard from a lot of parents all over. That's a confusion. Some parents have to work from home. Some parents have to go into work. Kids need to feel confident with their friends and get back into some sort of, you know, interaction, even though they wear masks and everything else. So is there a plan in place better than the rollout of where we're going to be in the future?
When you say the future, do you mean just this school year or future school years or both?
I want to say this school year,
yeah,
and next year.
Yeah.
Because as we know, you know, as the vaccine rolls out and the world changes again and again and again, what's the plan in place for going forward?
Yes, thank you for that. Look, the honest truth is we don't have an exact plan at the, you know, so for all of it. I think that let me go, you know, start in the future and go backwards because I think that's easiest. I think like the mayor and chancellor plan, hope, intend, will do everything possible. And I believe we have a very strong chance of being back live this fall, as long as the vaccine rollout continues. The mayor is working hard and the administration is working hard to accelerate that. And of course, we don't know what the course of the pandemic will bring, you know, so we have to hope that, you know, that we don't see any new flare-ups or new developments, new variants. But assuming things remain, you know, the facts remain as they are and the vaccination continues to accelerate, I think the plan and the hope and the intent would be that we're largely back live in the fall because the population will be vaccinated, but we have to see how that develops. I think that in the shorter term, the mayor and chancellor have been working hard to bring as many students back to elementary school 5 days a week as possible, focusing first on our most vulnerable students and students from underserved populations, students with disabilities, our youngest learners who are still learning to read and have difficulty accessing remote class without an adult sitting next to them and helping them move through it. English language learners, students in temporary housing who don't have a safe and steady place to engage. So that we're working like school by school to try to get as many of those students back full time as possible, space permitting, so that we keep everybody social distance and are following all the safety precautions. Middle and high school, I think we're working very hard to get those back. That is part of why I think we've seen such an emphasis on making sure our school staff is in what we call category 1B, which is just a way of saying they're near the top of the list for vaccinations. And I think we're hopeful that we, in accelerating our progress there, we'll be able to get students safely back into middle and high schools as quickly as possible, but we don't have a date for that at the moment.
Thank you. We have a question from Mark.
Yes, one more question. You bring up vaccination. Is there going to be any requirement or protocol for teachers and or students as September comes around in order for them to come back into the classroom?
Yeah, the mayor was asked about this, and what he said is that he believes that we should our approach should be a voluntary one. That he's not discussing sort of mandating or requiring people to be vaccinated at this moment. That's the latest I have, but I haven't had the discussion directly, so I want to be careful not to sort of like state policy that I don't know. He was asked about it last night, and that was his answer, so that's my clue. But we can get back to you with more, sort of official guidance when we have it. But that's the stance right now, is we're keeping it voluntary.
Thank you.
So if there aren't any more questions, I will just love to thank you so much for taking the time. I think communication, especially around COVID, is key to reach all parts of our community, our diverse community here in Queens. The mayor was here yesterday at Hillcrest High School. It was a very active vaccination site from what we saw. And we're excited to see that our educators are being prioritized. I actually teach at CUNY, as well as some of our other colleagues here. And just from speaking with my colleagues, they're running to get the vaccine to make sure that we're safe for our students. And so we want to get back to being able to teach in person. And we want to thank you for all of the work that you're doing and setting the example in K through 12. And I would be remiss if I didn't say hi to Alan, who is one of the most amazing people on your staff, I think. And he has been instrumental in bringing technology solutions to public schools and forging really innovative partnerships. So we look forward to working more with him as well, and with you, as we put forward our digital economy strategy for the borough. And we're just to preview it. It's a concept called Queens Tech 2025. And so there's more to come on that. The borough president will be, making more announcements in the coming weeks. But we just wanted to thank you this is an unprecedented time that you all have just worked so tirelessly, and appreciate your dedication. So Josh, I know that you're going to be sending the presentation.
Yes.
And we can distribute that more widely. Any closing thoughts?
I just want to say thank you to all of you for taking the time and for your partnership, and look forward to working with you in the weeks and months to come. If you ever have any questions or concerns, you can reach out to me. I'll put my email address in the chat, or to Alan. I agree. He was so helpful in getting ready for this, and is just a terrific partner. And yeah, we're just looking forward to it. Thanks again for your understanding, your patience, and your work.
Thank you. And on behalf